You know, there are two kinds of darkness. There's the regular kind at night, when you turn out the lights. It's a comfortable darkness, you know. Your eyes adjust. You can make out the shape of the dresser, the window frame. You always know which way is up. But then there's mineshaft dark. A true, absolute black that feels like a physical weight. It presses on your eyeballs. It swallows sound. Down there, a mile beneath the surface, if your cap lamp goes out, you don't just lose your sight. You lose your sense of direction, your balance, your sanity. You forget which way you are facing. You could be staring at your own hand, an inch from your nose, and you wouldn't know it was there. That kind of darkness, it changes a man, and the silence that comes with it is even worse. That's why, in the beginning, I was grateful for the noise. I was 22, fresh out of trade school, and green as they come. I'd landed a job at the Agrium potash mine in Saskatchewan. This wasn't some hole-in-the-wall operation. This place was a subterranean city, miles and miles of tunnels, wider than a 2-lane highway, carved out of a prehistoric seabed. The money was incredible, life-changing money for a kid like me. The trade-off was you spent 10 hours a day in the crushing embrace of the earth. Because I was the new guy, the FNG, I got assigned to the oldest, deepest, and least desirable part of the mine, Sector Gamma 7. And with it, I got assigned to Silas. Silas was a legend. He'd been working that mine for damn near 40 years. He was a small, wiry man, with skin like worn leather and knuckles that were permanently swollen and scarred. He moved with a quiet, deliberate grace that was unnerving. He knew every crack in the salt walls, every groan the rock made before it settled. The other miners respected him, but they kept their distance. They called him the Deep Watcher, said he'd been down there so long, he was more rock than man. Our job was simple, if lonely. We were on maintenance duty in Gamma 7. The main mining operations had moved on years ago, so it was just us, a mile down, keeping the essential machinery running. And the most essential piece of machinery down there was the sump pump. You see, a mine is always trying to flood itself. Groundwater seeps in through a million tiny fissures. If you don't pump it out, the whole place fills up. The pump in our sector was an ancient behemoth of a thing installed in the 60s. It sat in a massive cavern at the lowest point of the mine, sucking water out of a deep, black collection pool and forcing it all the way to the surface. And it never, ever stopped. It made this noise, a deep, rhythmic, 2-part sound, a low, resonant thrum as the intake valve opened, followed by a heavy, percussive thump chunk as the piston drove the water up. Thrum, thump, chunk. Thrum, thump, chunk. Day in, day out. It was the heartbeat of the mine. At first, it was just background noise, annoying, but after a few weeks, it worked its way into my bones. It was the only thing that broke the oppressive silence. It was about a month in when Silas first said it. We were eating our lunch, our cap lamps cutting twin cones of light in the darkness. "She's singing a pretty tune today, ain't she?" he said, his voice a dry rasp. I stopped chewing my sandwich. "Singing? You mean the pump?" He nodded, a slow, knowing smile spreading across his face. "Oh yeah, she's always singing. You just gotta learn to listen to the words. Tells you what she's feeling, what the deep is feeling." I just sort of laughed it off. Old-timer eccentricity, you know. But he kept it up. Every day, he'd comment on the song. Sometimes it was a happy song. Sometimes it was angry. One day, the pump sputtered for a second, a slight change in its rhythm. I barely noticed. Silas froze, his head cocked. "She's hungry," he whispered, his eyes wide. "We gotta be careful today." That was the first time I felt a real shiver of unease. The way he looked, it wasn't an act. He believed it. He'd spend hours just standing at the edge of the sump pool, this vast, dark body of water that disappeared into a flooded tunnel system no one had been in for half a century. He'd just stare into the black water, his head tilted as if he was listening to a conversation I couldn't hear. He started telling me stories the other miners never talked about a collapse in '78 that the company record said never happened, about a geologist who went missing down here in the '80s. His helmet and lamp were found right at the edge of the sump pool. They figured he just fell in. He didn't fall, Silas told me, his voice barely a whisper over the pump's rhythm. Thrum, thump chunk. He was a gift. Sometimes the deep gets angry. The rock starts to groan. It wants to take everything back. You gotta give it something to calm it down. A little gift to keep it happy. My blood ran cold. A gift? Silas, what are you talking about? He just smiled that creepy, serene smile. The pump knows. It always knows when a gift is needed. The song changes. It gets hungry. I started to feel like I was trapped. I was a mile underground with a man who was, at best, losing his mind. I thought about going to the foreman, but what would I say? That the old guy is spooky? That he thinks the pump talks to him? They'd laugh me out of the office and send me right back down. So I kept my mouth shut. I just tried to do my job and stay as far away from Silas as I could. Then came the day of the tremors. It wasn't a big one, just a deep, powerful shudder that ran through the rock, knocking dust from the ceiling. We both froze. Then another one hit, stronger this time. A deep, guttural groan echoed down the tunnels. It was the most terrifying sound I'd ever heard. I looked at Silas, and the look on his face, it was pure religious terror. It's woken up, he breathed. It's angry. I knew it, the song. It's been angry all week. He grabbed my arm, his grip like iron. Come on, we have to go, now. He wasn't leading me toward the elevator shaft, toward safety. He was dragging me deeper, toward the sump pump cavern. Silas, what are you doing? We have to get out of here. I yelled, trying to pull away. We can't. He screamed back, his voice echoing in the vast space. We have to calm it down before it takes the whole mine. It needs a gift. And that's when I finally understood. The geologist. The collapse in '78. His old partners who'd retired or transferred. I looked at his wild, fanatic eyes, illuminated by my cap lamp, and I saw my own future. I was the gift. He was surprisingly strong. He dragged me to the edge of that sump pool, the black water churning below. The pump was roaring now, its rhythm faster, more violent. Thrum, thump, chunk. Thrum, thump, chunk. It sounded like a monstrous, hungry mouth. Don't fight it, boy, Silas hissed in my ear. It's an honor. You'll keep us all safe. You'll be part of the deep. You'll hear the song forever. Adrenaline is a funny thing. It can freeze you, or it can turn you into an animal. I chose animal. I jammed my steel-toed boot into his shin hard. He grunted in pain, his grip loosening for just a second. It was all I needed. I spun around and slammed my helmet into his face. There was a sickening crunch, and he staggered back, blood pouring from his nose. He just looked at me, not with anger, but with a profound, sorrowful disappointment. You've doomed us all, he whispered. Then he lunged. We wrestled there, on the slippery edge of the abyss, two small figures in a vast, dark cavern, dwarfed by a machine that sang a song of hunger. He was all wiry strength and desperate faith. I was just young and terrified. Our cap lamps whipped around, casting frantic, dancing shadows on the rock walls. I was losing. He was forcing me back, inch by inch, toward the water. I could feel the cold spray on my neck. My foot slipped. I was going over. In a last, desperate move, I grabbed the heavy spanner wrench that was clipped to his belt. I swung it blindly, connecting with the side of his head. He went limp. His eyes rolled back, and he tumbled backward, away from me, landing half in and half out of the churning water. For a second, there was silence. The tremor had stopped. The only sound was the pump. Thrum, thump, chunk. I scrambled back, my heart hammering. I looked at Silas's body, and at the vast, dark mine around me. I could leave him. I could run to the lift, tell them there was an accident, that he slipped during the tremor. No one would ever know. But as I started to back away, I heard something. A new sound mixed in with the pump's rhythm. A low, guttural sucking noise. I turned my lamp back to Silas, and I swear to God, I saw it. The dark water of the sump pool was swirling around his body, and from the flooded tunnel beyond, something was emerging. I couldn't make out a shape. It was just a presence. A patch of darkness that was even blacker than the water. It was pulling him in, slowly, silently. I didn't stay to watch. I ran. I ran faster than I've ever run in my life, not even looking back. I didn't stop until I was in the elevator cage, frantically jamming the button for the surface. When I told them what happened, I left out the part about the fight. I said Silas fell during the tremor. A tragic accident. They organized a recovery team, but by the time they got down there, his body was gone. They searched the sump pool, but it was too deep, too dangerous. They just assumed the current had pulled him into the old tunnel system. Case closed. I quit the next day. I couldn't take the money, couldn't take the job. I moved 1,000 miles away, but I never really left that mine. Because sometimes at night, when it's perfectly quiet, I can still hear it. That deep two-part rhythm. Thrum, thump, chunk. And I know what Silas meant. It's not just a pump. It's a heartbeat. And it's always, always hungry. In my line of work, you learn to trust two things, your gear and the tapping. I'm with the Provincial Mine Search and Rescue Unit. When the Earth decides to swallow a piece of a mine, we're the guys they call to go in and get our people out. It's a dirty, dangerous job, but there's no feeling in the world like hearing that faint tap. Tap, 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 coming through a wall of rock, and knowing there's someone alive on the other side. It's the sound of hope, but about 4 years ago, I heard a tapping that wasn't hope. It was something else entirely. The call came in just after dawn. A major seismic event at the Black Creek Colliery. A whole section of the 4 West Tunnel system had collapsed. There were 6 miners unaccounted for. We loaded up the truck and were on site in under an hour. The mine manager, a panicked guy in a suit that was already covered in dust, met us at the entrance. They were working the new scene, he said, pointing at a map, right up against the old exploratory wall, the one that backs onto Shaft 9. A couple of the older guys on my team, guys who'd worked this region for decades, exchanged a look. I was new to this particular area, so I asked, "What's Shaft 9? My crew chief, a guy named Garvey, grimaced. "A bad place," he said. "They sealed it up in 1953. Methane fire. Took out 12 guys. They never even recovered the bodies. Just walled it off, put up a cross, and called it a tomb." Great. So not only were we dealing with a fresh collapse in unstable ground, but we were right next door to a mass grave. Superstitious or not, that's just bad mojo. Our team was made up of 4 guys. Me, Garvey, a young hotshot named Kale, and a quiet, intense guy named Decker. Decker was one of the best. Calm under pressure, knew geology better than anyone. If you were trapped, he's the guy you'd want coming for you. We made our way in. The first couple of miles were stable, just the usual trek. But as we got closer to 4 West, the damage was immense. The main tunnel was just gone. A solid wall of twisted steel supports and shattered rock blocked the path. This wasn't a localized cave-in. A huge section of the mountain had shifted. We got to work. Standard procedure. Shore up the ceiling as you go, listen for sounds, use the thermal imagers. For hours, we found nothing but crushing silence. The air was thick with coal dust and the smell of ozone from fractured rock. The hope starts to drain out of you in a situation like that. You start to feel like you're working in a morgue dot. It was Decker who heard it first. He held up a hand for silence, his head tilted. Listen. We all froze. And there it was. Faint but unmistakable. Tap, tap, tap. Tap it was coming from deep inside the collapse. A wave of adrenaline hit us all. They were alive. Garvey got on the radio, his voice cracking with excitement. We have contact. We have a signal. But as we started digging, trying to pinpoint the location, something felt wrong. The sound wasn't coming from where the miners were supposed to be. According to the map, it was coming from the other side of the tunnel. From the concrete wall that sealed off Shaft 9. That's impossible, Kale muttered. That thing's been a tomb for 70 years. Garvey shook his head. Maybe the collapse breached the wall. Maybe one of our guys got thrown through and is trapped on the other side. It was a long shot, but it was the only shot we had. We used the drill to bore a small hole through the thick concrete seal. When we broke through, the air that hissed out was stale, cold, and smelled of rust and something else, something old. We fed a fiber optic camera through. The images that came back on the screen were haunting. It was like looking back in time. Old wooden supports, antique tools scattered on the ground, everything coated in a thick layer of gray dust. It was the mine from 1953, perfectly preserved. And it was empty. There was no sign of our missing miners, but the tapping continued. Louder now. It was definitely coming from inside Shaft 9. All right, Garvey said, his jaw set. Something's not right, but we follow the sound. Decker, Kale, start widening the hole. Be careful. This whole area is unstable. It took another hour to cut an opening big enough for a man to squeeze through. The whole time, the tapping kept on. A steady, insistent rhythm. I was the first one through. The air in Shaft 9 was heavy, oppressive. The silence between the taps was absolute. Our headlamps cut through decades of darkness, revealing a scene frozen in time. A lunch pail sitting on a rock. A pickaxe leaning against a wall, as if its owner had just set it down for a moment. But there were no bodies. No signs of the fire, just emptiness. We followed the tapping deeper into the old shaft. And that's when the other strange things started happening. I saw a flicker of movement out of the corner of my eye, a shadow that looked like a man in old-fashioned mining gear. When I turned my head, there was nothing there. Kale swore he heard whispering. Faint voices carried on the dead air. Decker was the only one who seemed unaffected. He was a machine, focused only on the mission. Quit spooking yourselves, he grumbled. Let's just find the source of that noise. The tapping led us to a small secondary tunnel. And there, we found something that wasn't from 1953. It was one of the missing miners, or what was left of him. He was half buried under a rockfall, and it was clear he'd been dead for a while. But the thing that made my stomach turn was the deep, circular indentation in the back of his helmet. It wasn't from a rock. It looked like it had been made by the pointed end of a rock hammer. And next to his body, we saw the source of the noise. A small battery-powered emergency beacon, its light blinking faintly. It had been wedged under a rock, its striker mechanism hitting a metal support beam. Tap, 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 tap. He must have activated it before he died, Garvey said, his voice low. But that didn't make sense. The beacon was on our side of the Shaft 9 wall. We were already in the collapse. The sound we'd heard from the outside. It couldn't have been this dot, and then I saw it. Scratched into the coal dust on the floor, right next to the body, were words. It looked like the dead miner had written them with his last ounce of strength. The message was simple. Decker. He killed the foreman. Collapse was him. I felt a jolt of ice-cold dread. I looked up slowly, from the words on the floor to my teammates. Garvey and Kale were staring at the body, horrified. Decker was standing a few feet behind them, and he was looking right at me. He'd seen me read the message. In that split second, I understood everything. The foreman was another one of the missing miners. Decker had murdered him for some reason, caught him stealing. An argument, who knows? He'd used explosives to cause the collapse to hide the body, not realizing 5 other guys were still in the section. The beacon wasn't a call for help. The dead miner had set it up to lure rescuers in, to lead them to the evidence. And the tapping we heard through the wall, the first tapping, that hadn't been a beacon at all. It was the ghosts. The miners of 53, trapped in their tomb, they were trying to warn us. They were trying to get justice. Decker's face, usually so calm, was now a mask of pure, murderous rage. He didn't say a word. He just lunged, not at me, but at the timber support right next to Garvey and Kale. It was already fractured from the blast. He kicked it with all his might. There was a horrifying crack, and the ceiling above Garvey and Kale gave way. It all happened in an instant. I screamed their names as tons of rock and earth came down, burying them completely. Now it was just me and Decker, alone in a tomb, our headlamps cutting frantic beams in the swirling dust. "You should have just kept digging," he snarled, raising his rock hammer. He came at me, and we fought. A desperate, savage battle in the grave of a dozen dead men. He was trying to kill me, to make me the final victim of the collapse. I scrambled backwards, deeper into the old shaft. I could hear whispers all around me. I could feel a coldness that wasn't just the air. I felt like the ghosts were there, watching. I tripped over an old rail line and went down hard. Decker was on me in a second, the hammer raised. I closed my eyes, waiting for the blow, but it never came. Instead, I heard a gasp and a sickening, wet crunch. I opened my eyes. Decker was staring down at his own chest. Protruding from it was the rusted, sharp end of an old pickaxe. Behind him, standing in the gloom just outside the beam of my lamp, was the shadowy figure of a man. He was tall, gaunt, wearing the helmet and gear of a 1950s coal miner. He looked at me, gave a slow, solemn nod, and then just faded back into the darkness. I was the only one who walked out of the Black Creek colliery that day. The official report lists it as a tragedy, a seismic event that caused a collapse, killing 6 miners and 3 members of a heroic rescue team. They found Decker's body, impaled on an old piece of mining equipment. A freak accident in the chaos, they called it. They never found Garvey or Kale, but I know the truth. I know that the dead have their own kind of justice. And I know that sometimes, when you're deep beneath the earth, in the suffocating dark and silence, you should listen for the tapping. But you better pray you know who or what is knocking on the other side. You ever do something so stupid, so monumentally dumb, that you can't even tell people the whole truth about it? You just give them the edited version, because the full story makes you sound like you deserved what you got. Yeah, that's me. There were 4 of us. Me, Liam, Shane, and Ben. We'd known each other since high school. We weren't bad kids, but we were bored. Stuck in a dead-end town with nothing to do but drink beer and dream about getting out. And our big, brilliant, get-rich-quick scheme was gold. Not panning in a river like some old prospector. We were going to go into the Widowmaker. The Widowmaker was an old, abandoned gold mine up in the hills behind our town. The name wasn't a joke. It earned it. It was opened in the 1880s and shut down in the 1920s. In that time, it swallowed more than 30 men. Badly dug, unstable, full of vertical shafts, they called man-traps and pockets of bad air. The entrance was boarded up, plastered with warning signs. Everyone in town knew the stories. It was a place you just didn't go. But Ben was obsessed. He was the smart one in our group, the planner. He'd spent months at the library, digging up old geological surveys and mining company records. He was convinced that the old-timers had missed a major quartz vein. He showed us maps, pointed to faded lines. They were feet away from it, he'd say, his eyes gleaming. $1 million in ore, just sitting there, waiting for someone with the guts to go get it. Guts. Yeah, that's what he called it. The rest of us were skeptical, but Ben was persuasive. And we were desperate. So we pooled our money, bought some climbing ropes, cheap headlamps, and a canary in a cage, Ben's idea, for the bad air, and one Friday night, we went up the hill. Prying the boards off the entrance felt like breaking into a crypt. A wave of cold, musty air washed over us, smelling of wet rock and decay. The darkness inside was absolute. We switched on our headlamps, and the beams cut into a blackness that felt solid. The first couple of hours were exciting, I guess. It was an adventure. We were explorers. We followed Ben's map, navigating through decaying tunnels, our voices echoing weirdly. The silence in between our words was total. The first accident happened about a mile in. We were crossing a section where the floor was rotten planking over a dark chasm. Liam, who was always the clumsy one, put his foot right through a board. He yelled, and for a terrifying second, he was just gone, swallowed by the dark. But the rope we'd tied between us held, and we managed to haul him back up. He was shaken. His ankle was twisted pretty bad, but he was alive. "That's it for me, guys," he said, his voice trembling. "I can't go on." Ben was furious. "We're almost there, man. Don't bail now." But Liam was done, and he couldn't make it back on his own. Shane, his best friend, volunteered to take him. "We'll wait for you at the entrance," Shane said. "Just be careful." So then it was just me and Ben. The atmosphere changed instantly. The fun was gone. Now it felt serious, dangerous. We pressed on, deeper and deeper into the mountain's guts. The air grew colder. The canary in its cage was still chirping, so at least we could breathe. We reached a junction, and Ben checked his map. "Okay, we need to go down this shaft," he said, pointing his light at a dark, vertical hole with a rickety old ladder bolted to the side. "The vein should be at the bottom of this level." My stomach clenched. "Ben, that ladder looks like it's 100 years old." "It'll hold," he said, with a confidence that bordered on insane. "I'll go first." He started down, and I followed, my hands slick with sweat on the cold, rusty rungs. Halfway down, I heard a sharp crack from above me, followed by the terrifying sound of splintering wood and falling rock. I looked up just in time to see a huge chunk of the ceiling, right at the top of the shaft, give way. A cascade of rock and rotten timber came crashing down. Jump, Ben screamed from below me. I let go of the ladder and jumped, falling the last 10 feet and landing in a painful heap next to him. The debris crashed down where I'd just been, completely obliterating the ladder and sealing the top of the shaft. We were trapped. Panic set in. Real ice-in-the-veins panic. We were miles underground with no way back up. We were going to die here. Calm down. Ben snapped, his voice sharp. Panicking doesn't help. There's another way out. The old surveys showed an air shaft that connects to the surface on the far side of this level. We just have to find it. His calmness was reassuring. He was the smart one, the planner. He'd get us out of this. We spent the next few hours searching the maze of tunnels on that lower level. It was a nightmare. Dead ends, flooded passages, tight squeezes that made my skin crawl. And then we found it. A narrow circular shaft going straight up with an iron-rung ladder, just like the other one. A faint draft of fresh air was coming down. It was our way out. But as Ben shined his light up the shaft, his face fell. Damn it. About 30 feet up, the ladder was gone. A whole 10-foot section of it had rusted away and fallen. There was no way to climb past the gap. And that's when Ben did something strange. He wasn't panicked. He wasn't disappointed. He smiled. A small, cold, calculating smile. "Well," he said, turning to me, "looks like we have a problem. What do we do?" I asked, my voice cracking. "You know," he said, his tone conversational, "Liam's ankle. It wasn't an accident. I kicked that board out from under him. And the cave-in at the last shaft? I loosened those timbers before we got there. I was hoping it would take you both out. Save me the trouble." I just stared at him, my mind refusing to process his words. What are you talking about? Why?" His face hardened. "Because of Sarah Jenkins." Sarah Jenkins. A girl from our high school. She died in a car crash our senior year. Ben had been driving. We were all in the car. The official story was that he'd swerved to avoid a deer. We all backed him up. But the real story, the one only the four of us knew, was that we had been drinking. Ben was drunk. He killed her. And for years, that secret had been eating him alive. Liam was starting to talk, Ben said, taking a step toward me. He was feeling guilty, talking about going to the cops. I couldn't let that happen. I couldn't go to prison. I figured this was cleaner. The old Widowmaker mine claims 4 more victims. A tragic accident. No one asks any questions. I finally saw it. The plan. There was no gold. There was never any gold. The mine was just a weapon. A tomb he'd chosen for us. And I realized the final piece of his plan. The air shaft wasn't a dead end for him. He was the best rock climber among us. A 10-foot gap would be nothing for him. He was going to kill me, climb out, and walk away with the perfect story. "It's just you now," he said, pulling a geology hammer from his pack. He came at me. We fought in the claustrophobic darkness, our headlamp beams slashing across the rock walls. He was bigger, stronger, and he was fighting to protect his secret. I was just fighting to live. He swung the hammer, and I ducked. It hit the rock wall next to my head, sending a shower of sparks. In that flash of light, I saw the canary cage on the floor. I scrambled away, grabbed the cage, and threw it at his head with all my might. It was a stupid, desperate move, but it worked. It caught him off guard, and he stumbled back, right into a section of wall that was nothing but rotten, crumbling timbers. There was a groaning sound, and the wall gave way. Ben disappeared in an avalanche of rock and dirt. 1 second he was there, the next he was gone. Buried. Silence. My headlamp beam cut through the dust. There was just a wall of rubble where he had been standing. It took me 6 hours to get out. 6 hours of the most terrifying rock climbing of my life, using my bare hands to find holds in the dark, 30 feet above a hard rock floor. When I finally crawled out into the moonlight, I was bloody and half insane. I found Shane at the entrance, huddled by a fire, frantic with worry. Liam was already on his way to the hospital. I told Shane a story, that the mine had collapsed, that Ben and I were separated, that I saw him get buried. A tragic accident. They never found his body. The mine is too unstable to ever mount a recovery mission. Sometimes the cops ask me questions, but I stick to my story. But I know the truth. I know what's buried deep inside that mountain. It's not $1 million in gold. It's a secret. And sometimes, late at night, I wake up in a cold sweat, convinced I can hear someone digging. And I wonder, what if a man like Ben, a man so determined to survive, was strong enough to dig his way out? What if he's just out there somewhere, waiting? I got out of the Widowmaker, but I'm not sure I'll ever truly be free of it. And that's all for tonight. Remember, the most terrifying monsters are the ones that look just like us. The ones who might even live right next door. If these stories serve as a good reminder to trust your instincts, then show your support and like and subscribe. Hitting that bell means you'll get a warning before the next nightmare begins. Sleep well, if you can.